Hey everybody, it's Kennedy Hawk from the Minis, Cards, and More team, and this week we have a second weekly video about my second game that I play a lot, Altered TCG. So I'm going to have a deck guide today for Altered TCG's Tasia, which is one of the leaders you can play from the Muna faction. It's the leader that I play the most, so this deck is near and dear to my heart, and I'm excited to share it with you all. If you haven't played Altered before and you're one of our Marvel Champions fans, you can check out what Altered is all about in one of our What is Altered videos from last month. Otherwise, stick around and learn about this deck that's going to feel kind of like a leadership build-up upgrade deck. All right, Altered TCG Tasia's deck guide. Here we go. All right, so an overview of how I'm going to do deck guides for Altered TCG. It's a little bit different than how I do things for Marvel Champions, although I might take this and then use it as a Marvel Champions template in the future. I'm going to kind of go over what my method is for building decks in Altered TCG. A lot of times when I build a deck, I actually do it in the opposite order of what I'm going to present you here. Usually I look at the unique cards I have or the rare cards I have and try to find a cool combo that I want to build around with those cards. That's definitely an awesome, valid way to play, and I love doing that as well. But when I'm sharing my decks with the outside community, I think that doesn't always make sense because the unique nature of unique cards in Altered means that the uniques I have are not going to be the same as the uniques of the person that's watching this video. So instead, I'm going to take my deck building process, flip it on its head for this video, and start in the opposite direction. I'm going to say, what if you were a player that just joined and got given a bunch of commons from your store for free, because everybody's got too many commons, and you had to build a deck with just commons for Tasia? How would we build that deck? Then we're going to take that common deck and look at what 15 cards would I upgrade to be rares, or what out-of-faction rares would I bring in to fill my 15 rare slots. Once I've picked out what to upgrade, we're going to go over what uniques I should be looking like. We'll look through 6 of my uniques and say, does this fill the void we have in this deck or not? And we'll talk about what we should resource at the beginning of the game and strategy tips and things like that. All right, so like I said, my deck guide method for Altered for right now is going to be building commons only decks, figuring out what rares to upgrade to finish out the theme of that deck, and then how to make that deck unique with our unique cards. So we'll go from gray to blue to golden. All right, so first we're going to start by taking a long look at our hero. And I like to call them hero and companion pairs, but the card just calls them a hero. So we have Teija and Naru here. Tasia has 2 reserve slots, 2 landmark slots, and the lovely Muna faction, or green faction. The first character you play each afternoon gains 1 boost, so they basically gain a +1/+1/+1 stat line, which is awesome. This really means that we can take a 1-cost character and give them the body of a 2-cost character by playing them first in our turn. That means on the first turn, we could almost drop 2 2-cost characters onto the board by playing a 1-cost character and boosting them, and then playing another 2-cost character, which really gives us this aggro-style pushing aggression towards the field. It also means that if we want to play on curve, you start at 3 resources in Altered, so we could play a 3-drop. That 3-drop is going to outpace almost any other 3-drop in the game because we're going to get a boost on top of it. So we can sort of build in 2 different ways. You can run with low to the ground characters that stick around and allow you to boost and then keep that boost around for multiple turns with things like Anchored, or you can run on curve drops and always appearing to be above curve, outwitting your opponent. Without Anchored, that might mean that you're contesting a little bit slower, so you're more of a mid-rangey deck versus an aggression swarmy deck. So I'm going to build the top bullet today, but when we revisit Tasia later this month, we'll try building the other bullet as well, and then we'll move on to other factions within Altered in the future. So, boosted stats. Let's just look at what boosted stats look like for people that haven't played a lot of Altered before. Here we have a Dracana. It's a 3-cost from hand or 3-cost from reserve character. It has the dragon and plant traits, and it has 0 in grass, 2 in mountains, and 2 in lakes. When we play this character, it gains Anchored, so it's immediately going to stick around for another turn, and at noon the next day it gains a boost, so the next day it becomes a 1/3/3, like we can see over here. But with Tasia, that gets even better. That means the first turn I play this Dracana, it's going to be a 1/3/3, and 3 is a very good stat line for forcing people to really try to fight you and contest you early in the game. Like a Dracana could be a great turn 1 play. And then the following turn, that Dracana is going to become a 2/4/4, meaning that it might be able to hold an expedition all by itself for 2 consecutive turns, giving you 2 motions of progress. So these boosted stats can really make a character a lot stronger than they were. right? You might find an empty region with grasslands, but not have any grasslands characters in hand, and then you could play this Dracana and give it the boost to be able to contest that region and try to move and make progress on your expedition. Really cool. So every character we're going to look at here, we're always going to be thinking in the back of our mind, how much better is this character if I give it one extra boost? So we talked about Anchored on Dracana, and I think that's the key to this low to the ground strategy for Tasia. Anchored characters don't return to reserve during rest. They stay out one extra turn. So we basically get that boost from Tasia, and we get to count it twice instead of once, making it twice as valuable. So here are some of the characters within Muna, some of the cheaper characters that have Anchored built into them. We're looking at characters that don't require us to go through loopholes to give them Anchored. So we have the Spindle Harvesters here. They're a 1 cost 1/0/0, but with Tasia, again, that'll be a 2/1/1 that gains Anchored. We have the Sneezer Shroom, which is slightly more expensive than the Spindle Harvester, but becomes a 2/2/2 with Tasia. And both of these have arrow abilities, so they gain Anchored from hand or reserve. So you'll be able to play them 2 turns later from reserve, getting that boost to last twice 2 times. Dracana, we already looked at, also gains Anchored from reserve. And then there's some more expensive options. We have Parvati here, who is a deity character. They have 3 grass, 0 mountain, 3 lakes, which would be a 4/1/4 if played from Tasia. But you probably wouldn't play them first unless you had an anchored character from last round that you wanted to re-anchor, because they have a from hand playability, target character gains anchored. So if we have a character that we've gotten a lot of boosts on, you could play Parvati to anchor that character turn after turn, keeping them on the field. And we're going to see some characters that that's really important for here later. We also have the Cone Man. He's a 5/5 3/3/3 with Anchored. He's a bit expensive, right? If you're getting to 5 resources and playing him, he's taking up your whole turn to be a 4/4/4 in 1 province. At the same time, that Sneezer Shroom for less than half the cost could just be a 2/2/2 in the same region, or the Dracana could be a 1/3/3 and contest almost just as well. The 4/4/4 is pretty good when you play this with Tasia, but it really requires you to have an anchored character beforehand. So I'm not a big fan of the 4 and 5 cost characters, and let's talk about why. So there's a lot of other anchor that you can include in your deck that isn't just built into a character, but through support abilities and spells. So let's look at the right-hand 3 cards on these slides. So we have Meditation Training. It's a spell that when you play it from your hand only costs you 2. Target character with a hand cost of 3 or less gains anchored. So if we play our Spindle Harvester turn 1, turn 2, it'll have anchored, but you'll remove anchored during dusk, so it's going to stick around for turn 2. You could then play Meditation Training to keep Tasia's boost out there for 1 additional turn. But it does cost you 2 resources, so you have to decide if that's worth it. We also have Muna Druid and Muna Caregiver, so these are not plant characters. They don't have anchored. They're just vanilla bodies with a 3/2/2 and a 0/1/0. But they have that little green box at the bottom, which is hard to read this far zoomed out, but it says, discard me from reserve to do this. Target character with a hand cost of 3 or less gains anchored. So as a free action, when these go to reserve, you're able to turn them into free anchored to keep your characters out forever and ever and ever. And we can see with Dracena, like we talked about earlier, they're going to start as a 1/3/3 with anchored. The next turn, they're going to become a 2/4/4. If you play Meditation Training on them, then on the 3rd turn, they're going to become a 3/5/5, and they just continue growing and causing problems for your opponent. So we want to include this anchored support. But all of our anchored support, if we include 3 copies of Med Training, 3 of the Druid, and 3 of the Caregiver, they only target characters that cost 3 and less. And for that reason, I'm not going to include Parvati or Confernal Cone Man in my deck this time. I think they might work in a Tasia sort of try to stick on curve, where you play a Dracana, and then you Parvati it, and then the next turn you Cone Man, and then you play Parvati from reserve with her rare version or something. But I think they fit more into a sticking on curve deck rather than a staying low to the ground and having multiple bodies deck. My playstyle is that I like to always contest both regions if I can, and I feel like I can do that better with lots of smaller bodies. Alright, so the deck so far, if we include from that second anchored slide those 6 cards at 3 copies each, we've got 6 1-drops with our Spindle Harvester and our Muna Caregiver. We've got 3 2-drops with our Sneezer Shroom. We've got 6 3-drops with our Dracana and our Muna Druid, and 3 meditation training spells. I like having a lot of 3-drops because we can anchor anything that's 3 or less. 3s are usually going to have the biggest bodies we have available to us, so those are the characters we want to anchor and have them stick around forever. One more comment on Muna Druid. So Muna Druid is that 3-2 vanilla with a 3-2-2 stat line. If I don't draw into an awesome combo on round 1, I don't mind only contesting one region round 1 to slap a Muna Druid down. That Muna Druid from Teija is going to become a 4-3-3. There's very few things that can contest that in round 1 without dropping multiple bodies into that region. So they're losing hand advantage compared to you. And then that Muna Druid enters your reserve, where next round you can either play it for 2, and you can also play a 2-drop with it, or you can use it to anchor something that's really important to your strategy in the future. So getting these reserve characters into reserve is something we're going to have to figure out how to do. So far we're at 18 out of 39 cards, 40 with our leader deck, and we're going to keep adding commons and see what we can find next. So you may have noticed that all of our anchored characters, our characters that gain anchored when played, were plants. So just like other games, Altered has traits, right? Kodama here is a plant spirit. Aloe Vera is a plant. There's going to be synergy with these different traits. So I thought we could look at what other low-cost plants exist in the game, and does it make sense to include them? We have a couple requirements, right? We want things that cost 3 and under, because we want to be able to anchor them. We want them to have really good bodies, so that when Tasia boosts them and we anchor them, we keep big stats around for multiple rounds. So let's look at Kodama and Aloe Vera. So Kodama is a 2-cost character with a stat line of 3-3-3. That's the best stat line we've seen on these bodies so far. The Cone Man cost 5 and was 3-3-3. But the Kodama from hand gains a sleep. So a sleep is kind of like a negative anchored. You anchor your character. They don't go away during dusk, but their stats do not count for that round. So Kodama is fine for us because we can play it. It becomes a 4-4-4 from Tasia, and then next round it becomes a 4-4-4 to attack for us. It eventually goes to reserve and doesn't gain a sleep when played from reserve, so it's a very value-added character. But it is a delayed benefit, so if your first turn you're playing a Kodama and nothing else, that means you're contesting neither of the regions. I still include it because I really like the body, and I like to be able to anchor bodies that have 4-4-4, 3-3-3 stat lines and things like that. Aloe Vera. Aloe Vera is by far the best 3-cost plant character. I think you can build decks around Dracana, but you have to include Aloe Vera in your decks, or so I feel. So Aloe Vera is a 3-cost from hand, 3-cost from reserve character plant in Muna, 2 grassland, 2 mountains, 4 water. That means you could drop this turn 1 and contest 5 in water if that's where your opponent wants to go. Or when you get to that water-only region, you drop an Aloe Vera and they almost always have to drop 2 characters to contest him. At noon, this character can resupply, but that means we need to find a way to anchor this character so that they're around at noon and not in our reserve. So this means they synergize with our combo even more. It's a character that we want to apply anchored to that has big stats that also gets us a benefit if we anchor them. So these are definitely going to be inclusions in our deck. Let's look at what plant support we have, right? We had anchored support-like cards. Do we have cards that support plants? We do. So searching on the database on Altered.gg, we can find a few things. We can find Yongsu, the Druid Weaver. Yongsu is a 3-3, 3-3-3 stat line. So again, like the Confernal Cone Man without anchored, but same stat line for 2 cheaper. With an arrow ability that comes out from reserve and from hand, if you control 2 or more plants, I gain 2 boosts. That means for 3 resources, this can become a 5-5 if you have plants that were out there that were anchored from previous turns. 5-5-5 can swing and contest almost any region, especially when playing early in the game before players get big characters. I think this card is definitely an auto-include. We'll look at the rare version of it later and see if maybe it's even better, but I really like 3-3-3 bodies that cost 3 or less that we can anchor. We don't have to only anchor our plants. We can also get this guy to be 5-5-5, anchor them, and keep them around for multiple rounds, which is just bonkers. Alright, the next card I want to talk about is Bountiful Meadow. It's a 2-cost from hand or reserve landmark or permanent. It's the only landmark we've talked about so far. And you can exhaust it, and the next plant you play this turn costs 1 less. So this can be great for comboing multiple plants out there. If we want to get a Spindle Harvesters and something else out, we might need to reduce their cost or have to wait until later rounds when we can ramp up and play both of them. That being said, we're sticking low to the ground, so I'm not sure ramp really makes a lot of sense for us, because if the most expensive thing we're going to have in our deck costs 3, making it cost 2 doesn't have a big impact for us. But for now, we'll keep it in there and see how our deck shapes out once we get to the upgrading to rares phase, right? All right, so let's look at our deck so far. So we've added Kadoma, Aloe Vera, Yongsu, and Bountiful Meadow. So we're up to 10 cards in our deck, 3 copies of each. I'm almost always going to start by including 3 copies of a card, play it a couple times and see if it's a card that I always resource, and then think about reducing the count or replacing it with something else. So we're at 30 out of 39 cards. We've got 3 cards left to pick from. Let's see what we can find. This is what I'm going to add. I'm going to say this up front. The name of the game in Altered right now is Removal. Every color has some kind of removal, and you should probably be running it. Everybody's removal is a little bit different, right? So like purple has just hard removal, pink has a lot of push to reserve and conditional removal, like giving things fleeting. Red has a lot of bounce to hand, blue has a lot of bounce to reserve. Whatever your faction is, find those removal cards and consider adding them, because the name of the game, when you get towards the end and it's that last province and one of you has to progress and the other one has to not progress, if you can play some small bodies, especially in a low to the ground Muna deck, and then Mana Reaping or Beauty Sleep, whatever their big threat is, to shut it down for the turn, a lot of times that'll win you a game. So we're going to include these cards. We're going to include 3 copies of Mana Reaping. It is a fleeting spell that costs 3 from hand or from reserve. It puts a character or permanent into its owner's mana zone. So we could target our own things. We probably won't in our deck, but we could target big bodies our opponent plays. Consider it's like the 6 resource turn, and we've played an Aloe Vera. We anchor it from support. Our opponent plays a 3-drop and a 3-drop to try to contest both regions because they went first. And we say, cool, we're going to Mana Reaping the one in the other region. We're going to win with our 5 in water with our Aloe Vera, and you're not going to move at all. So yes, we've ramped them, but also we've gotten this giant board state. And since our characters anchor, that tends to snowball to victories for us. Another option here is Beauty Sleep. It costs 1. Target character gains a sleep. So this can be used offensively or defensively, right? If our opponent has passed and we have 2 characters out there, so we're going to contest the province either way, or expedition, we might want to Beauty Sleep one of those characters so they stick around for another turn. It's like an anchored, but since we know we're going to win the expedition, we can actually like prolong the life of our characters, which is our whole theme with all this anchoring and Tasia. So we're definitely going to include 3 copies of that. And then, because I said it, right, the name of the game is Removal. People are going to be off you going. They're going to be doing all sorts of horrible things to your anchored characters, your beautiful plants that you have planted and nurtured, and you just want to leave on the board. So we need to make them think twice about that. And the Spindle is how we do that. So the Spindle is a 3 cost from hand or reserve Muna Bastion landmark, and its characters you control gain tough 2. Your opponent's spells and abilities that target your characters cost 2 more. So that means if your opponent wants to play Off You Go from hand, that's a 2 cost Ysmir purple spell that bounces a character from play to reserve if it costs under a certain value. Hence, that value is it's all of our cards. All of our cards can be Off You Go'd. Well, now it's going to cost 4 from hand for them to do that for the Spindle. So that might take their entire turn. That might not let them contest. So yeah, they get to remove us, but also they've had to pay a lot more for it. If they want to play Off You Go from reserve, it costs 4. Now it's going to cost 6. That's almost untenable. You're paying 6 to remove a 3-cost character. That's a losing proposition for your opponent. A lot of times, it'll force them to attack the Spindle before they attack your characters, and that's exactly what we want. The Spindle also has this advantage of it gives your characters tough stacks. So if we get 2 copies of the Spindle in our 2 landmarks, it's going to cost our opponents 4 more to target our characters. And that's not just from spells, right? Dorothy Gale is a Ysmir character that when played pushes a character to reserve. They can play Dorothy, but if they want to trigger her ability, they have to pay 2 to target one of your characters. That means Dorothy's all of a sudden going to cost 6 to remove a character instead of 4, which is, it's big for us, right? We need that to keep our anchored characters in play. This is especially important for Cloth Cocoon, which is a Muna rare, out of faction rare, or it's normally in the Lyra pink faction. It targets characters that have anchored or fleeting, or asleep, but mainly anchored, right? If we have a big old anchored body out there, we do not want that character being discarded by Cloth Cocoon. We want them to have to pay and make it really painful for them to remove our characters. All right, so those are our last 3 cards. Let's check out our deck so far. We've got 39 cards in it, all commons. This is a completely functional deck. You can take this deck, Go build it, play with it. You'll have a ton of fun. It has all sorts of ways to anchor your characters, right? We've got 9 support abilities. We've got 9 characters that come in with anchored. We've got Kadoma, who comes in asleep. Aloe Vera, who comes in and you want to use those anchor support abilities on. We've got ways to make them cheaper. We've got removal. We've got a big 5/5 body that's efficient. Super fun. But the cool thing about Altered now is that we get to pick 15 cards and upgrade them to their rare version. So let's look at what versions we want to do that to. When I'm upgrading my deck from commons to rares, like I've been trying to do for this video, I consider a few things. What am I missing in my deck? Is there something that I don't have? Is there a gaping huge weakness? Like in this deck, I don't have an end game, right? My end game is to swarm and have my bodies build up. But if my opponent just slaps down like an 8/8/8 9 cost character, if I don't mana reaping it, there's no answer for me. I just have to like play in the other expedition and hope I can win. So I'm missing some things, right? What cards fit my strategy substantially better if I upgrade them, right? Is there a card that like just gets a straight up upgrade? Sometimes they'll upgrade the ability but also increase the cost. Is there anything that's just like a, oh duh, yeah, that needs to be in there? And then are there cards that don't make sense to keep for swapping for something out of faction, right? We didn't get to look at the commons of those out of faction cards because they're from another faction. They only come in as rares. So we should look for our anchoring, our plant synergy, our removal and protection from removal cards from out of faction cards. So let's go through and do it. All right. Swaps 1 and 2. I'm going to make this easy for you. One of the things we're missing, right? What are we missing? We want to swarm a lot with ground units. We want low to the ground units, and we want a lot of them. Some may call this like an aggro strategy. You're swarming and pushing a bunch of like goblins to the board, but they're plants. They're cute. You're gardening. It feels a bit more like a build-up build in ours because we're trying to put these boosts on them and use anchors to keep our swarms out. So our swarm isn't like fragile like a normal swarm is, where like it could just get removed and be over, or it'll go away and you'll have to swarm every turn. Either way, whatever you want to call this, we want a lot of bodies on the board. But we only draw 2 cards a turn, and we're typically resourcing at least 1 until we're at 6 resources. So we're drawing 1, resourcing 1, and playing 1 once we're into top deck mode. And that feels bad, right? The one thing aggro and low to the ground swarm decks needs is gas. We want gas in the gas tank so we can just keep playing cards forever. And with the reserve and characters coming back multiple times, there's some inherent gas in the engine of Altered already, but we can get more. So let's look at these 2 anchored characters. We'll look at Spindle Harvesters and Aloe Vera. These are big swaps for us. These are must-haves for our low-to-the-ground deck. So Spindle Harvesters is a 1-cost 1/0/0 that gives itself anchored. When you upgrade it, it has the same stats, the same cost, but it has a new ability. At noon, if I have 2 or more boosts, resupply, which means take the top card of your deck and put it into your reserve, drawing you like half a card, right? If you consider a card draw from your deck to hand, a full card draw, putting something in reserve is like half a card because it's going to get fleeting when you play it. Still really powerful, especially when we have those support abilities that can, poop out anchored turn after turn. So we want to boost this Spindle Harvester and get that free resupply. And then let's look at the upgrade to Aloe Vera. Again, it's a 3/3/2/2/4, so same stat line, same cost, same ability. At noon, gain a resupply, but it also has a play from anywhere ability. You may pay 1 to give this character anchored. So we can make this a 4-cost character that also gains anchored. So now we have a 1, 2, 3, 4-cost character that all gain anchored. And this anchored character will also resupply for us. So if we can play an Aloe Vera, give it anchored, it resupplies something that might also give it anchored. You can just get this perpetual engine of this Aloe Vera sitting out there, giving you more cards so you can choose where to play from your hand or from your reserve at the optimal time. So I definitely want to swap out 3 copies of each of these for their rare versions. What other cards take big jumps? Let's look at some of our other plant support stuff. We had Muna Druid for anchoring support and Yongsu. So Muna Druid was a 3/2/3. He was a 3-cost from hand, 2 cost from reserve, 3/2/2 attributed character with just that anchoring support ability. The upgraded version has the same cost, but his stat line is sufficiently lower. It's a 2/1/1. So yeah, from Teija, that's a 3/2/2. And he has a from hand ability up to 1 target plant gains 2 boosts. So this might be something to include, right? We could play a Spindle Harvester, anchor it, and then play a Muna Druid to make sure that it gets those 2 extra boosts. But losing the stat line really hurts me, and not being able to be played from reserved makes this character less agile. One of the big advantages of the common Muna Druid is with Tasia, you can always make that a 4/3/3, which is a really good, really big body to anchor. So you don't have to default to using its support ability. But here, the Muna Druid, once it's in reserve, just becomes a 2/1/1. That doesn't feel as good. Even at a 3/2/2 from the Tasia boost, you're probably going to always use the anchor support ability, which feels like a waste of a rare upgrade because you already had the option to do that in the non-rare version. Next, let's look at Yongsu. So they were a 3/3, 3/3/3 attributed character, and now they are a 2/2, 2/2/2 attributed character. So they have lower stats at lower cost. You can probably sneak them into turns better. They have the same ability. So I like this character. It lets me play 2/2 drops on turn 2. Like I could play a Dracana turn 1, and then I could play a Sneezer Shroom and a Yongsu. But I like to be able to anchor really big 3-cost bodies, right? If I have 2 anchored characters and I play this Yongsu first on my turn, that's going to become a 5/5/5 because it'll get the +2 from its own ability and the +1 from Tasia. But the other character is going to become a 6/6/6. I want big stats if I'm going to waste my anchor support abilities on not my plants that are drawing me cards. So I don't think these two are the best choice to upgrade. How can we add to our anchoring strategy, right? So one of the things with our anchoring strategy is we like these support abilities that let us keep our key characters out for longer. So I looked at the Kodama upgrade, and the Kodama rare has the same stat line, same ability, but gains a support ability. So now we're gaining a whole new option from this character. So I like upgrading the Kodama from common to rare, because now between the Druid, the Caregiver, and Kodama, we have 9 characters with a support ability that when pulled in from resupply can anchor a character. That's really good, right? That means about a quarter, 25% of our deck can anchor from the reserve row, which we likes. I also wanted to look and talk about the Spindle. I like the common Spindle. The 2 tough is nice. But here we just get a straight up upgrade, which is what I liked about Aloe Vera and the Spindle Harvesters. Is like they didn't lose stats or anything else. They are just like straight up better cards as the rare version. So the Spindle here has a 3/3 cost and still gives our characters tough 2, but it gets an added bonus of at noon, target character you control gains 1 boost. So at noon, you might have a bunch of at noon abilities. You get to choose which ones to trigger when. So if you have this with a Spindle Harvester out, the Spindle Harvester may get 1 boost from Tasia. The next turn, the Spindle can give it a boost to get it to 2 so that it can then resupply and fill your board. This is a really powerful card for our board with these anchored characters that we want to sit out for a long time, right? Our Dracana that we've played can now gain 2 boosts at noon, so if we can keep anchoring that Dracana, it becomes this 11/11/11 monster that is hard to remove. So I think these are better jumps for our deck, so let's include these upgrades, and we're up to 12. So this really helps harvesters, like I mentioned, right? One of the problems with Spindle Harvesters is they need 2 boosts to be able to resupply. Tasia only gives them 1, and we haven't talked about any other cards that can help us boost characters. So we really need to figure out ways to get extra boost onto the Harvesters. That could be that Muna Druid, but I like it being the Spindle because we already had that in our deck. It's going to be versatile even when we don't have the Spindle Harvesters out, and it's really going to force your opponent to attack your landmarks instead of your characters. We should look at other ways to get our second boost, though, right? Like, we can't count on always drawing Spindle Harvesters with the Spindle. Obviously, they combo. We get it. But there should be other things we can do with these Harvesters as well. And this is where I start to look at out-of-faction cards. So here, I'm going to recommend Ogun. It's a 2/2 card. I think he's an Axiom card normally. And they have 2 forest, 1 mountain, 1 ocean or lakes or water, whatever it's called. And they have an arrow ability, so when played from anywhere, plants you control gain 1 boost. So turn 1, round 1, you can play a Spindle Harvester and make it a 2/1/1 in one of your regions. Your opponent then plays a card, and depending on where they play, hopefully you can play Ogun to the other expedition and give that Spindle Harvester its second boost right away. So it becomes a 3/2/2 in the hero region. Ogun is a 2/1/1 in the companion expedition, letting you try to contest both, and your Spindle Harvester is immediately going to resupply on the next turn, and Ogun will go to reserve so that you can play them again. Amazing card, especially if you have lots of anchored characters that are going to last for multiple turns. All right. Well, if we're going to add Ogun to our deck, that means we have to drop something, right? Everything else we've looked at here, the Kodama, the Spindle, the Harvesters, the Aloe Vera, they were already in our deck. So we're just removing the common and adding in the rare version. But here we're adding an entirely new card. So I'm going to nominate Bountiful Metal as the card we remove. I think Bountiful Metal is a wonderful card. The rare is also beautiful and resupplies for you if you pay one or something like that. But I think it makes more sense than one of those ramping decks, right? There are some expensive plants. There's a 6 cost and a 7 cost plant that just is bonkers if it can get on the board and not get removed. The reason I don't play that deck is I do feel like the name of the game right now is removal, so it feels really bad to play a 7 cost body and then have my opponent pay 3 to remove it from the game. They've just gained a 4 resource advantage. But if we can get Bountiful Meadows out and only pay 5 for those 7 cost characters and they have to pay 3 to 5 to remove it, then cool. Eventually they're going to run out of removal and your big bodies are going to last. But that doesn't help us much in this low to the ground deck. It's more important for us to draw cards and for us to make sure we can trigger Spindle Harvesters. So let's focus on that and remove our Bountiful Meadow, but focus on getting those Spindle Harvesters boosted up with Ogun. So here's our deck when we go to the rare upgraded version. The cards that are outlined in blue are the cards that are rares. The cards outlined in green are our common cards. It looks like I skipped one other thing here somewhere, and it's if we wanted to make any more changes. I put my images in the wrong order. Any more changes before we lock in our rare deck, right? Here's our rare deck version right now that was supposed to be on the last image but was not. We probably don't want 6 removal spells, right? We are an aggro deck at the end of the day, and I think eventually the game will evolve to this. Every game I play, it always starts with like a lot of people playing aggro, and then people getting bodied by like mid-rangey control spells or cards or mid-rangey decks that also have a little bit of removal, and then people seeing how strong removal is, and every deck just grabbing every piece of removal and shoving it into their deck. But ultimately, that like takes away from our strategy. I think it's always going to be a little bit important in this game, but having 6 removal spells between Beauty Sleep and Mana Reaping is probably a bit of overkill. Those games when it's the end game and all we have to do is draw something like a character to win and we draw a Mana Reaping and a Beauty Sleep are brutal. So we want something else that fits into our strategy a little bit better. So I'm going to recommend dropping 1 copy of Beauty Sleep, 1 copy of Mana Reaping, and adding 2 copies of Nurture. Nurture is a 2 cost from hand, 1 cost from reserve spell that gives target character 2 characters 1 boost. This is another card you can play that first turn with Spindle Harvesters to power them up, although ideally later once you have 2 characters out. It's also nice because it's a spell that doesn't have fleeting, so if over 2 actions you can pay 3 to give 4 boost out amongst 4 characters or 2 boost to 2 characters each. And that can be a really big bump to help you increase your growing plant army. So I'm going to swap it to those characters, and this is my new rare upgraded deck. So I've got my 5 cards in blue that are 3 ofs that are my rares. We downed our Beauty Sleep and Mana Reaping to 2 of each. You might want to go to 3 and 1 depending on what you're more worried about. I tend to do 3 and 1, but your mileage may vary. And now we've got our 2 copies of Nurture in there in case we have an anchored character and just need a boost to win the game. All right, some other rare considerations that I want you to think about depending on your collection and depending on your playstyle. I think Sneezer Shroom was the first rare I opened, and it is still one of my favorite cards. Same stat line as the regular Sneezer Shroom, still gets anchored, but at noon it gains a boost. So it gains Dracaena's ability on a 2-drop, which is really, really strong, especially in Tasia, because you can play this thing, it's a 2/2/2. Next turn it's going to be a 3/3/3. If you can anchor it, it just grows and 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 grows. But for me, Dracaena already fills that void of gaining anchors turn after turn. It doesn't do enough new stuff as a rare for me to want it over Spindle Harvesters or Aloe Vera or the Spindle or other things, right? It's the Spindle's ability, but only for this unit, whereas the Spindle can put it on anything. So I'd rather upgrade other cards. Charon, really good card. It's an out of faction from the Bravos faction. He's 1 grassland, 0 mountains, 0 ocean, so he becomes a 2/1/1 like our Spindle Harvester, but he's a little more expensive. He gives up to 2 characters 1 boost each, and he can target himself. So this is another great move with Spindle Harvester. You can play your Harvesters, who's a 2/1/1. You can then play Charoon, who becomes a 4/2/1/1 when he boosts himself, and he boosts that Harvester. Gives you like more ways to trigger that Harvester, which is a consideration if you're finding out that you really need that trigger in card draw. I also like Inari. They are a 3 cost from hand, 2 from reserve, 3/1/3 character, so that's going to be a 4/2/4 with Teija. And at noon, you draw a card. So this is way better than Resupply. The card just goes right to your hand. Now, our deck, we've targeted around Resupply. We have these 9 characters that give anchored from the reserve row, so we almost prefer our cards to go to reserve. That being said, a 4/2/4 is still really contestable and a really good body. I used to have this in my deck until I got rare aloe veras, and then I swapped them out. I do think this card is good, but it gets us a little bit far from the plant focus. We probably have to switch Ogun to something else at that point, and then you start building a different deck. So yeah, your mileage may vary, but I really like it. Next, let's talk about more removal, right? I just said maybe we have too much removal, but the game is removal heavy right now, and there's a reason for that. So Cloth Cocoon comes from the Lyra faction. It is fleeting. Discard target fleeting, anchored, or a sleep character, or discard a permanent, like a landmark. This is really important, right? This is your answer to Robin Hood, who comes out and is put to sleep by Waru. Yeah, you pay 4 to get rid of that Robin Hood, but getting rid of him so he doesn't linger for 4 turns is pivotal for you playing your cheap characters. So I think that this card is really good. In my current version of this deck that I'm taking to game nights right now, I do have 2 copies of Cloth Cocoon. I drop 1 Kodama back down to common, and I drop 1 Spindle Harvester just entirely from the deck. But your mileage may vary, depends on your local meta. What I think is eventually going to be the card people prefer is this Acapella training, which also comes from Lyra. Target character gains fleeting. If it would be sent to reserve, discard it instead. This can be brutal for your opponent. If you play a Spindle Harvester on turn 1, and your opponent plays something that contests that region, you can give it fleeting. So your anchored character is going to stick around, and theirs isn't even going to go to reserve. It's going to go right to the trash at the end of the turn. And then they'll play another character. And guess what? You can play Acapella training again from your reserve and take both of their turn 1 plays and throw them in the trash at the end of the round. So yeah, they gain this sudden burst, but now their hand is decimated. They've got 1 card left in hand at the end of the round. They have nothing in reserve, and you have an anchored, boosted Spindle Harvester ready to wreck their day. So I really like Acapella training, and it's something that I've been tinkering with in my deck recently, but haven't quite figured out. All right, the big time, the big show. What do we look for in uniques? What kind of uniques do we want for this deck, right? This is the part of the game that we like, seeing these cool unique cards. We want something that either frees up a rare slot, right? There were those 5 rares that we considered that are really good rares that we'd love to fit into our deck. So if we can get a rare Kodama that does the same thing as Kodama but better, cool, free rare slot. We also want to just be able to straight up upgrade our commons. If we get a unique Sneasel Shroom that does what Sneasel Shroom does but better, cool. Straight upgrades are great. And then you want to look for uniques and figure out if they're a good fit. So we're going to look through some of the uniques in my collection and see if they're a good fit for this deck. And we'll do it one at a time. All right. We're going to start off with an easy one. I think this is hands down the best unique I own for Muna. It is the Muna Caregiver. It is 2 costs from hand, 2 costs from reserve, 0 status. Looks horrible as a body. From reserve, you can pay 1 to give a character 2 boosts. Spindle Harvester says yes. And then this amazing passive ability. When this character is in play, right? When another character joins your expedition, so either expedition, not the expedition Muna Druid is in, either expedition, up to 1 target character with a hand cost of 3 or less other than Muna Caregiver gains anchored. This is amazing. This means if we play a Muna Caregiver and then play a bunch of 1 and 2 drops, we can anchor our entire board other than her. So we need to find ways to keep her anchored, which is why we have all those support abilities and other things that can anchor things. So she is just an anchor monster. On top of that, she still has the support ability that our 1-cost Muna Caregiver has. So the boost ability comes in well. We're going to straight up replace the Muna Caregiver. Sometimes I'll say, let's put this card to the side and think about it, but this one, it's a no-brainer. We're going to be playing a lot of characters. She's going to give out a lot of anchored. A lot of times when I play her, she comes into play twice, and I get 3 to 4 anchors off of her each time, which is amazing. All right, let's look at some plants. Option 2, this Daughter of Yagardrasal. It's a 3/2 character, 3 cost, 2 cost character with 3/3/2 for their attributes. The Daughter looks really enticing and would work fine in a pinch. She has an ability if you control 2 or more plants other than me, plants you control other than me gain 1 boost. If that other than me wasn't there, this card would be rad. Right now, it's sort of like an Ogun. It doesn't target itself, which Ogun also doesn't do. It's a little more expensive than Ogun, and it has some conditions on top of it. And it also has this: when I leave the expedition zone, each player draws a card. Each player. I have played a lot of common and rare Daughter of Yggdrasil and just given people the answers to kill my deck. And I am not a fan of that. So I like that it's not on play that it draws a card. And we do like gas in our gas tank, don't get me wrong. You can also anchor this character and avoid that negative penalty of giving your opponent a card. But for right now, we're going to call this card a maybe. I'm going to put it in a pile over here on the side of my desk and think about it once I've seen all the uniques I have at my disposal. And we're only going through like 6 of the uniques I have in Muna. I'm like a Muna player, so I have a ton of Muna uniques. But we'll look at 6 considerations for today. All right, a unique Dracana. It's a 1/1/3 I gain anchored from hand ability. So we go from an arrow to a hand. So it's kind of a downgrade in abilities. And at noon, you may pay 1. If you do, target character gains a boost. The original Dracana just gained a boost itself, so this requires me to have another character in play, and to pay 1 to give out that boost. So while it gives me like a little more wiggle room in where I put my boosts, I don't think it's worth including in my deck. So we're not going to use this, we're going to put it back in the binder. Alright, let's look at this blue faction out of faction unique. We have Kakoba? Kakoba acts like an extra copy of Ogun. They're a 1/1/2 2-cost body, and they have an ability: if you control 2 or more plants other than me, which he's not a plant, so phrased awkwardly, characters you control gain 1 boost. So it hits all characters. This is going to hit all my druids too. So it's like a super Ogun, but it requires me to have 3 characters out. Good news, since we have a bunch of anchoring, we often have 3 characters out. We also get this cool ability that could give out fleeting. So I'm liking this. This is like a replacement for an Ogun for me. I could replace Ogun or remove him as a rare, but I want more ways to trigger that Spindle Harvester. So I'm gonna replace Nurture, because this feels like Nurture but with a body, and I like that. I like upgrading a card to have bodies with their abilities. Option 5, a unique Muna Druid, which we have as a common, so that's a good choice. We have this Druid as common. Upgrading would be easy. Yep. They maintain their support ability, so we can still discard to anchor something. And it has an anchor ability on the text. So the normal Muna Druid we have is just a vanilla character with a support ability, but this one gains an actual passive ability. At dusk, if you control 1 or more landmarks, up to 1 target character with a hand cost of 3 or less other than me gains anchored. So this is really cool. This is one to consider, because if we get our Muna Druid and our Muna Caregiver uniques out and the Spindle, then every turn Muna Druid can give anchor to Muna Caregiver so she doesn't go away, and then the first character we play can re-anchor the Muna Druid, so these 2 bodies just persist forever. But you probably heard how many times I said if there. If we have Muna Caregiver out, who costs 2. If we have Muna Druid out, who costs 3. If we have the Spindle out, that costs 3. So that is 3 cards and 8 resources from hand to make a combo work. Probably not very reliable. Cool when it happens, but I feel like this is more of a win more card in our deck. If our Spindle is out and we have characters to give anchored to, yeah, they're going to gain boosts and that'll be a cool combo. But it's going to require us to be a little bit ahead to be able to afford the pressure of playing this card. So I'm going to put him aside with my Daughter of Yggdrasil and look at one last option, called option 5 again, but it's really option 6. And this is an Inari rare deity character. And this character, I think, is the one for me. Unconditional Anchor. So the same ability as that Muna Druid we just looked at, but at dusk, up to 1 target character with a hand cost 3 or less other than me gains anchored. No need for a landmark. No need for that shenanigans. Same cost, slightly different stat line. Better than grass, worse than ocean. Similar. A different support ability. I'm not too wild about putting a card from my hand into reserve, but you could chain that to give something anchored, but 2 cards for anchored. Meh. But the dusk ability seems real good. This takes our 3-card, 8-resource combo down to 2 cards, 5 resources, which I think is a little bit more doable. So we're going to take those 3 and we're going to upgrade them. We're going to replace 1 copy of Nurture with our blue faction out of faction unique. We're going to replace 1 copy of Meditation Training with our Inari. That way we're still getting our anchoring just like we had before. And we're going to replace 1 copy of our Mood Caregiver with a Mood Caregiver. So we're still having the same amount of anchored, we're still having the same amount of boosts, but now 2 things that used to be spells have a body with them, and 1 thing that could only anchor from support can now anchor from support and the field infinitely. Seems way better. All right, we're going to close up with a couple strategy tips really quick. I've played a lot of Teija, definitely my favorite hero to play by far, because that's the style of deck that I like to play. Ideally, what you want to be doing is dropping an anchored body every turn. And I'm talking one of those 1, 2, 3, 4 Harvester, Shroom, Dracana, Aloe Vera bodies. They give themselves anchored. So you drop them in a province, and then on the next turn, you drop a new anchored body in the alternating province. That way, every round after round 1, you're pushing both fronts and pressuring your opponent to try to contest you in both. They're going to waste a lot of energy, a lot of resources, and not be optimized dealing with your constant assault. On top of that, if we get our Harvester and our Aloe Vera engine going, eventually you can build up to 2 bodies in both boards because you're resupplying so many cards and getting so many free anchors that you can keep your characters out. Don't overlook big bodies to force progress of movement, right? That Muna Druid and an Aloe Vera being a 3/3/5 or a 4/3/3 can really stick it to a province and move them, especially Yongsu once you have out enough plants. That 6/6/6 off of Tasia can be amazing. So don't overlook those big bodies. But remember, when you're playing against your opponent, the big advantage you have is you have a lot of low-cost cards. So if someone else is playing a ramp deck and they have to drop 1 big body and they're out of money, you now get to see where they place that body and then make all of your intelligent decision making. So play your lowest cost things first so that you can place things more optimally and like out action your opponent, if you will. What you're looking for in your opening hand is a Spindle Harvester and an Ogun. Or if you have a Spindle Harvester and a Spindle, you can save them for round 2, because you can always Harvester in one province, Ogun in the alternating province, contest in both, and then resupply next turn with the Harvesters. If you don't have that, you could play a Muna Druid to contest in one province, and then next turn you could play the Harvesters and the Spindle, setting up your resupply chain on turn 3. So you always want to be figuring out, how am I going to get that Aloe Vera or Harvester out there boosted, and how am I going to set up my resupply chain so that like every round I just have 4 cards from reserve to pick from, and these cards that are in my hand are just a bonus. I can resource them or do whatever I want. So last thing I'm going to remind you of is be aware of your opponent's removal. There's a lot of removal that's unconditional in this game, but there's a lot of removal for things under cost 5, under cost 4. Everything in your deck is under cost 4. So just about every piece of removal can hit you. Specifically, be thinking about Cloth Cocoon with when you put your anchors out and things like that. If you can get your opponent below 3 resources or below 5 resources, if you have the Spindle out, then their Cloth Cocoon isn't going to be able to target your characters, so you can use those support abilities to put out anchored and keep them safe. So those are my strategy tips for Tasia. I hope you take this deck for a spindle and have some fun. Thanks for watching. I'm going to flash the deck up here one more time and just go through it really quick. If you liked this video and you like Altered, be sure to like and subscribe and tell me in the comments what hero you'd like me to do a deck guide on next. All right, so the deck list, again, just recapping. We have 6 1-drops, our Spindle Harvesters, and our Muna Caregiver. I'm putting the rare version up, not the unique version, because you don't have the same uniques as me. For 2-drops, we've got 3 copies of Ogun, 3 copies of Kodama, and 3 copies of Sneasel Shrooms. So there's a good chance of double 2-drops on round 2. For 3-drops, we've got a Dracana, Muna Druid, Yongsu, and Aloe Vera. We've also got 3 copies of the Spindle, 3 copies of Meditation Training, and then 2 copies each of Beauty Sleep, Mana Reaping, and Nurture to boost up our little planties. Thanks for watching. It's been a blast. Hope you're all having fun playing Altered or whatever gaming you're doing this month of November. See you in a week.